My husband abandoned me, leaving me alone with my baby and homeless, until a luxury driver showed up. The sound of the door opening brought her out of her thoughts. It was Mike, her husband, with a grim expression Sarah had never seen before. "Mike, what's wrong?" "You're late," Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly. Mike avoided his gaze, dropping a suitcase on the floor. Sarah's heart raced, a lump forming in her throat. "Sarah, I can't do this anymore," Mike muttered, his voice barely audible. Sarah felt like the ground was opening beneath her feet. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice breaking. Mike finally looked at her, his eyes cold and distant. "I'm leaving, Sarah. This baby is not what I want. I can't be a father. I'm not ready." The words hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. He felt short of breath, his entire world falling apart in an instant. But Mike, what am I going to do? I don't have anyone else," Sarah pleaded, tears streaming down her cheeks. Mike grabbed his suitcase, again avoiding Sarah's gaze. "I'm sorry, but I've made my decision. Goodbye, Sarah." "Mike, please, don't leave me like this," Sarah shouted, her voice breaking into sobs. "Please don't do this to us." But their pleas fell on deaf ears. Mike walked out the door, closing it behind him with a bang that echoed through the small apartment like a final sentence. Sarah collapsed to the floor, her body racked by uncontrollable sobs. The baby in her womb moved, as if sensing its mother's distress. Sarah placed her hands on her belly, trying to comfort her unborn child as her own world fell apart. "Don't worry, my love," she whispered through her tears. "We're going to be okay. We have to be." But as the words left her mouth, Sarah felt like she was drowning in a sea of despair. The cold of the night filtered through the windows, enveloping Sarah in its icy embrace. She was alone, pregnant, and now homeless. Fear and uncertainty took over her as the reality of her situation hit her with full force. The night wore on, and with each passing minute, Sarah felt her future grow darker and darker. How was I going to survive? How was she going to take care of her baby? Questions swirled in her mind, unanswered, as silent crying shook her body. Outside, the city continued its relentless pace, oblivious to the drama unfolding within those four walls. For Sarah, the world she knew was over, and an uncertain and terrifying future lay before her. Dawn found Sarah still on the ground, her eyes swollen and red from crying. He stood up with difficulty, his body aching from the night spent on the cold floor. The reality of her situation hit her again like an unrelenting wave. With trembling hands, Sarah began to pack what little she could carry. Every object she touched brought with it a memory, a stab of pain that threatened to break her again. But he couldn't afford it. "Not now. We have to be strong," he murmured, caressing her belly. "For you, my little one." Sarah left the apartment with a suitcase and a heavy heart. The normally bustling streets of Chicago now seemed like a hostile maze. Every step was a challenge, every glance from passers-by a stab of shame and fear. After hours of walking aimlessly, fatigue and hunger began to take over her. He sat on a park bench, watching the happy families passing by, oblivious to their suffering. "What are we going to do?" she whispered, tears threatening to fall again. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through his belly. Sarah gasped, panic taking over her. No, not now, please," she pleaded, rubbing her belly. The pain intensified, and Sarah knew it wasn't a false alarm. Her baby was arriving here, in the middle of a park, with nothing and no one to help her. "Aid!" he shouted, his voice breaking with fear and pain. "Please, someone help me." People passed by, some looking curiously, others avoiding eye contact. Sarah felt the world closing in around her, panic threatening to drown her. At this moment, an elderly woman hurriedly approached. "Are you okay, Majida?" he asked, his voice heavy with concern. "My baby is coming," Sarah managed to say between gasps. The woman, Elena, acted quickly. He called an ambulance and stayed with Sarah, holding her hand and whispering words of encouragement. "Calm down, Mija. Everything is going to be fine. Breathe with me, okay? Inhale, exhale." Minutes seemed like hours as they waited for the ambulance. Sarah held on to Elena's hand like it was a lifeline in the middle of a storm. "I can't do it," Sarah cried. "I'm not ready. I don't have anything for the baby." Elena squeezed his hand tighter. "You are stronger than you think, little girl. And you are not alone. Do you hear me? You are not alone." Finally, the ambulance arrived. As the paramedics lifted her onto the stretcher, Sarah looked at Elena with pleading eyes. "Please don't leave me," he begged. Elena nodded, getting into the ambulance with her. "Here I am, Mija. I'm not going to leave you." As the ambulance made its way through Chicago traffic, Sarah was torn between the pain of childbirth and the fear of the future. How was I going to take care of a baby with no home, no money, no nothing? But for now, the only thing that mattered was bringing his son into the world. With each contraction, Sarah felt like her old life was fading away, giving way to an uncertain future but full of possibilities. The ambulance siren ripped through the air, carrying Sarah toward a destination she could never have imagined. His life was about to change forever, and all he could do was hold on to the hope that somehow everything would work out. The cry of a newborn baby filled the hospital room, mixing with Sarah's sobs of relief and joy. Exhausted but overflowing with love, she held her young daughter in her arms for the first time. "Hello, my love," Sarah whispered, kissing her baby's forehead. "I'm your mom." Elena, who had stayed by her side throughout the delivery, smiled with tears in her eyes. "She's beautiful, Mija. So perfect." For a moment, Sarah allowed herself to forget all her problems, lost in her daughter's eyes. But reality soon set in when a nurse approached with forms to fill out. "Father's name?" the nurse asked. Sarah felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured on her. "No, there is no father," he murmured, shame and pain evident in his voice. The nurse nodded sympathetically, but Sarah could see the pity in her eyes. That look would haunt her for days to come. 2 days later, Sarah stood at the hospital entrance, her baby in her arms and a bag of donated supplies at her side. Elena was there, her face a mix of worry and determination. "Where are you going, Mija?" Elena asked. Sarah looked around, panic threatening to drown her again. I don't know," he admitted, his voice breaking. Elena made a decision at that moment. "You'll come with me to the women's shelter. It's not much, but it's a roof over your head while you recover and decide what to do." Relief washed over Sarah, but was quickly replaced by anxiety. "But what if they don't accept me? What if there's no space?" "Don't worry, I know the director. I'll talk to her," Elena assured. The trip to the hostel was tense. Sarah looked out the taxi window, watching the city go by that now seemed so foreign and hostile. Her baby slept peacefully, oblivious to her mother's storm of emotions. Upon arriving at the shelter, Sarah felt a knot in her stomach. The building, although clean, showed signs of years of use and limited resources. Women of different ages came and went, some with children, all with stories of pain in their eyes. Elena spoke to the director, a middle-aged woman named Lucia. After a brief discussion, Lucia approached Sarah. "We have a space for you and your baby," Lucia said, her voice gentle but firm. "But you should know that this is temporary. You will have to look for work and a place of your own eventually." Sarah nodded, grateful but overwhelmed. "Thank you, I'll do whatever it takes." As she followed Lucia through the hallways of the shelter, Sarah felt the gazes of the other women. Some compassionate, some curious, and some hostile. "This will be your space," Lucia said, showing him a small room with 2 single beds. "You will share with another mother and her son." Sarah came in, placing her baby carefully on one of the beds. A child's cry was heard from the hallway, followed by muffled screams of an argument. "The rules are simple," Lucia continued. "Keep your space clean, respect others, and participate in common tasks. We have counseling available if you need it." Sarah nodded, trying to process all the information. When Lucia and Elena left, promising to check back later, Sarah sat on the bed, holding her daughter close. "We will make it, my love," he whispered, though his voice trembled with uncertainty. "Somehow we'll make it." As night fell over the lodge, Sarah lay awake, listening to the unfamiliar sounds around her. The future was a big question mark, full of challenges I couldn't even imagine. But for now, they had a roof over their heads and the promise of a new day. However, one question lingered in her mind, keeping her awake. How was she going to get out of this situation and give her daughter the life she deserved? The road ahead seemed impossibly long and difficult, But Sarah knew she had no choice but to keep going, one day at a time. The days in the shelter turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Sarah learned to navigate life in this new world, dividing her time between caring for her daughter, Lily, and desperately searching for a job that would allow her to get ahead. One morning, as she prepared for another round of job searching, her roommate, Marisol, watched her with a mixture of sympathy and concern. "Are you going out again, Sarah?" Marisol asked, rocking her own 2-year-old son. Sarah nodded, trying to maintain her composure. "I have to do it. Time is running out and I need to find something soon." Marisol sighed. "Hey, don't get discouraged. Something will work out, you'll see." Sarah forced a smile, but inside she felt like she was falling apart. Every day of fruitless searching was another blow to his already fragile self-esteem. He left the lodge with Lily in his arms, the morning sun mocking his desperation. He walked the streets of Chicago, entering stores, restaurants, offices, any place that might offer him an opportunity. "Sorry, we're not hiring," was the most common response. "We need someone with more experience," others said. And the worst of all, "We can't accommodate someone with a baby." Each rejection was like a dagger in his heart. Sarah fought back tears as she walked from place to place, Lily restless in her arms. "Easy, my love," Sarah whispered, although she wasn't sure if she was saying it to Lily or to herself. After hours of fruitless searching, Sarah sat on a park bench, physically and emotionally exhausted. Lily began to cry, hungry and tired. "I know, honey. I know," Sarah said, searching in her bag for the last diaper and a bottle. To her horror, she realized that the bottle was empty. "No, no, no, please not now." Lily's crying intensified, drawing disapproving glances from passers-by. Sarah felt like she was drowning in shame and despair. "Please, Lily, hold on a little longer," he pleaded, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Mom will find something, I promise." At that moment, a familiar voice startled her. "Sarah? Is that you?" Sarah looked up to meet the eyes of Jake, an old high school classmate. The contrast between his impeccable suit and Sarah's disheveled appearance could not be more evident. "Jake, Sarah didn't know what to say, ashamed of her situation. Jake looked at Lily, then back at Sarah, understanding dawning on his face. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" Sarah wanted to deny it, hold on to what was left of her pride, but Lily's crying brought her back to reality. Swallowing his embarrassment, he nodded. I'm looking for a job. Anything," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Jake seemed to think for a moment before pulling a card out of his pocket. "Look, the company where I work is looking for customer service staff. It's not much, but it's a start. Why don't you come in tomorrow for an interview?" Sarah took the card with trembling hands, a spark of hope lighting up in her chest. "Really? I thank you, Jake. Thank you." As Jake walked away, Sarah looked at the card in her hand. It was an opportunity, small but real. However, doubt quickly settled in his mind. What if they didn't accept it? What if he couldn't handle work and caring for Lily? The sun was beginning to set, and Sarah knew she had to get back to the lodge. As she walked, with Lily finally calm in her arms, a mixture of emotions washed over her. Hope, fear, determination, and doubt swirled inside him. Tomorrow would be another day, another opportunity. But as night fell over Chicago, Sarah couldn't help but wonder, could this be her last chance? Or just the beginning of more disappointments? With each step toward the shelter, the weight of these questions seemed to grow, along with the uncertainty of what tomorrow might bring. The next morning, Sarah woke before dawn, her heart beating with a mix of hope and anxiety. He looked at Lily, who was sleeping peacefully, and whispered, "Today could be the day that changes our lives, my love." She dressed in the best she had, which wasn't much, a borrowed blouse and a worn skirt. As she stared at herself in the cracked mirror of the communal bathroom, Sarah fought the voice in her head that told her she wasn't enough. Marisol found her at the door of the shelter, Lily in her arms. "Sarah, are you sure about this?" Marisol asked, concern in her voice. "What will you do with the girl during the interview?" Sarah swallowed, panic threatening to take over her. I hadn't thought about that. I don't know, he admitted, his voice breaking. But I have to try, Marisol. It's our only chance. Marisol nodded, understanding. Go. I'll take care of Lily. But promise me you'll be careful. Okay? Not everyone can be trusted in this town. With a lump in her throat, Sarah kissed Lily and handed her to Marisol. Thank you. I'll make it up to you, I promise. The bus ride into the city center was torture. Sarah was mentally reviewing possible questions and answers, knowing that this could be her last chance to get ahead. As she reached the imposing office building, Sarah felt herself shrinking. He took a deep breath and walked in, addressing the receptionist. Good morning, he said, his voice shaking slightly. I'm here for a customer service interview. The receptionist looked her up and down, a doubtful expression on her face. Name, Sarah Thompson. After a brief wait that seemed like an eternity, Sarah was ushered into an office. Jake was there, along with a stern-looking woman who introduced herself as Ms. Rodriguez, the human resources manager. The interview began, and Sarah felt like every question was a litmus test. Why should we hire you, Ms. Thompson? Ms. Rodriguez asked, her tone cold and calculating. Sarah took a deep breath, mustering all her courage. Because I will work harder than anyone else. Because this opportunity means everything to me and my daughter. Because... Suddenly, the door burst open. It was Marisol, with Lily crying in her arms. Very sorry, Marisol exclaimed, panting. The girl has a fever. She couldn't stop crying for her mother. She didn't know what else to do. The world seemed to stop. Sarah looked at Jake, then at Mrs. Rodriguez, panic evident in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Sarah stammered, getting up to pick up Lily. I understand if this ruins my chances. Thank you for your time. But before he could leave, Mrs. Rodriguez spoke. Wait, Mrs. Thompson. Please sit down. Sarah obeyed, cradling Lily in her arms, expecting the worst. I see you have responsibilities, Mrs. Rodriguez continued, her tone changing slightly. And I see that you are willing to do whatever it takes to meet them. That's something we value here. Sarah held her breath, not daring to wait. We'll give him a chance, Ms. Rodriguez finally said. It will start next week. But I warn you, it won't be easy. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, a mixture of relief and gratitude flooding her. Thank you very much. I won't let you down, I promise. As she left the office, with Lily still in her arms and Marisol at her side, Sarah felt like she was finally seeing a ray of light at the end of the tunnel. But I knew this was just the beginning of a new challenge. How am I going to handle all of this? She whispered, more to herself than to Marisol. Marisol squeezed his shoulder. One day at a time, friend. One day at a time. As they walked toward the bus stop, Sarah couldn't help but feel like she was on the brink of something big, scary, and potentially wonderful. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he dared to hope. However, one question lingered in his mind. Would he be able to handle the demands of this new job while caring for Lily? And more importantly, what other challenges awaited you in this new chapter of your life? Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Sarah settled into her new job, juggling between the demands of the office and caring for Lily. Every day was a struggle, but one he faced with fierce determination. One night, as Sarah was walking back to the shelter after picking up Lily from daycare, she noticed a black limousine parked nearby. It wasn't common in this neighborhood, and Sarah couldn't help but be curious. Suddenly, the limousine door opened and an elegantly dressed man stepped out. His eyes met Sarah's, and for a moment time seemed to stop. "Excuse me, miss," the man said in Mexican-accented Spanish. "Could you help me? I'm looking for an address." Sarah, with Lily asleep in her arms, hesitated for a moment. Sure, what address are you looking for?" The man, who introduced himself as Jack, showed him a piece of paper with an address scrawled on it. Sarah recognized the street. It wasn't far. "It's a few blocks from here," Sarah explained, pointing in the direction. Jack smiled, his eyes shining with something Sarah couldn't decipher. "Thank you, you saved me. I'm new in town and my GPS failed me. Can I offer you a ride home as a thank you?" Sarah felt a mixture of alarm and temptation. The offer was tempting. His feet hurt after a long day of work, and Lily was getting heavy in his arms. But the voice of caution in his head was screaming. I don't know," Sarah hesitated. "I wouldn't want to bother you." Jack noticed his hesitation. "I understand your concern. Look, I'm a professional driver. Here's my ID and the company's ID. You can call them if you want to verify." Sarah looked at the ID, then at Lily, and finally at her sore feet. He made a decision. "It's okay," he finally said. "Thank you." As she settled into the back seat of the limo, with Lily still asleep in her arms, Sarah couldn't help but feel like she was on the brink of something. The luxurious interior of the vehicle was a stark contrast to his life at the shelter. Jack began to drive, occasionally glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "Can I ask your name?" "Sarah," she responded, still cautious. "Sarah," Jack repeated, as if savoring the name. "Tell me, Sarah, what is a woman like you doing walking alone in this neighborhood at this hour?" The question took her by surprise. I work nearby. I live at the women's shelter a few blocks from here." Jack nodded, his expression unreadable. "I understand. Life can be hard sometimes." They arrived at the shelter too soon. Sarah prepared to leave, but Jack stopped her with a question. "Sarah, would you like a better paying job? One that allows you to leave the shelter and give your daughter a better life?" Sarah's heart raced. What do you mean?" Jack handed him a card. "Call me if you're interested. It could change your life." Sarah took the card with trembling hands, a mix of hope and fear swirling in her stomach. As he stepped out of the limo, with Lily still asleep in his arms, he couldn't help but feel like he was on the brink of something big, scary, and potentially wonderful. The limo drove away, leaving Sarah standing in front of the lodge, Jack's card burning in her hand like a promise and a threat. What secrets did this offer hide? And was she willing to risk it all for the chance at a better life? With her heart pounding, Sarah entered the shelter, knowing that the decision she made could change her life forever. The question was, would it be for the better or the worse? Sarah sat in the small hostel room, Jack's card between her trembling fingers. Lily slept peacefully in the makeshift bed, oblivious to the whirlwind of emotions that was going through her mother. "What I do?" Sarah whispered to herself, her voice breaking. "Do I risk everything for an opportunity?" The memory of the limousine, of the luxury it represented, contrasted painfully with the reality of his current situation. Sarah looked around, the peeling walls of the shelter seeming to mock her dreams of a better life. At that moment, Marisol entered the room, immediately noticing the distress on Sarah's face. "What's up, friend?" Marisol asked, sitting next to her. "I see you more worried than usual." Sarah hesitated for a moment before answering. "Marisol, what would you do if you had the opportunity to change your life, but you didn't know if it was safe?" Marisol frowned. "What are you talking about, Sarah? What opportunity?" With shaking hands, Sarah showed him Jack's card and told him about the encounter with the mysterious limo driver. "I don't know what to do, Marisol," Sarah confessed, tears threatening to fall. "Part of me wants to accept, do whatever it takes to give Lily a better life. But another part is afraid. What if it's dangerous? What if I'm putting my daughter at risk?" Marisol took Sarah's hands in hers. "Look, Sarah, I understand your desperation. We all do here. But you have to be careful. The world can be very cruel to women in our situation." "I know," Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But what if it's my only chance? What if I never get a chance like that again?" Silence filled the room, broken only by Lily's soft breathing. Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking at the city lights shining in the distance, so close and yet so far. "I can't go on like this, Marisol," she said finally, her voice taking on a determination that surprised even herself. "I can't let Lily grow up in a place like this. I have to take the risk." Marisol approached her, concern evident on her face. Sarah, please think carefully. We know nothing about this man. Sarah turned to her friend, a mix of fear and resolution in her eyes. I know, but what choice do I have? If I stay here, I know exactly what our future will be like. At least then I have a chance. With shaking hands, Sarah grabbed her phone and dialed the number on the card. Each waiting tone seemed to last an eternity, his heart pounding in his chest. Finally, a voice answered on the other end of the line. Hello. Sarah took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment. When he opened them, his gaze fell on Lily, and in that instant, he knew there was no turning back. Hello, Jack, he said, his voice surprisingly steady. I'm Sarah. About that offer. I'm interested. As the words left her mouth, Sarah felt as if she had crossed a point of no return. What consequences would this decision have? Would she be leading her daughter toward a better future or toward unknown danger? The silence on the other end of the line seemed to stretch on for an eternity before Jack responded. His voice heavy with an emotion Sarah couldn't decipher. Excellent. Decision, Sarah. See you tomorrow at 9 at the cafe on the corner. And Sarah, get ready for your life to change. The call ended, leaving Sarah with a mix of excitement and terror. She looked at Marisol, who was watching her with an expression of concern and resignation. May God protect you, friend, Marisol whispered. Sarah nodded, turning her gaze to the city beyond the window. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was in control of his destiny. However, one question lingered in his mind. At what price would this new opportunity come? Sarah adjusted her designer dress, feeling like an imposter in the luxurious penthouse she now called home. 3 months had passed since she accepted Jack's offer, and her life had taken a 180-degree turn. Are you ready, honey? Jack's voice brought her out of her thoughts. He stood at the door, impeccably dressed in a black suit. Sarah nodded, forcing a smile. Yes, I'm coming. As they rode down the private elevator, Sarah couldn't help but feel a mixture of gratitude and anxiety. Jack had kept his promise. He now had a roof over his head, stylish clothes, and most importantly, Lily was well taken care of. But the price? Remember, Jack whispered, squeezing her arm lightly. Tonight is crucial. Mr. Ramirez is a very important client. Be charming, but not too charming. And please, don't mention anything about your past. Sarah felt a knot in her stomach. I know, Jack. Don't worry. The car was waiting for them outside. During the ride, Sarah looked out the window, remembering how she got to this point. The parties, the business meetings, the powerful men. It was all a dangerous game that I didn't know how to get out of. They arrived at an exclusive restaurant. Mr. Ramirez, a middle-aged man with a predatory smile, was waiting for them at a private table. Ah, Jack, my friend, Ramirez greeted, his eyes fixed on Sarah. And this must be the lovely Sarah. My pleasure, dear. Sarah felt a chill when Ramirez kissed her hand, but she kept her smile. The pleasure is mine, Mr. Ramirez. Dinner passed in a haze of small talk and forced laughter. Sarah played her role perfectly, but inside, she felt more and more trapped. Suddenly, Ramirez leaned toward her, his breath hot on her ear. How about we escape from here, precious? I know a more intimate place. Panic gripped Sarah. She looked at Jack, seeking help, but he simply nodded with a tight smile. I. Sarah stammered, her mind working at full speed. At this moment, his phone rang. She was Lily's babysitter. Sorry, I have to attend, Sarah said, getting up hastily. In the bathroom, Sarah answered with shaking hands. Mrs. Sarah? The nanny's voice sounded worried. Lily has a high fever. I think we should take her to the hospital. Sarah's world stopped. On the one hand, her daughter needed her. On the other hand, she knew Jack would never forgive her if she ruined this night. With her heart racing, Sarah made a decision. He left the bathroom and approached the table. I'm so sorry, he said, his voice shaking slightly. My daughter is sick. I have to go. Jack's expression darkened dangerously. Sarah, I'm sure the babysitter can handle it. No, you can't, Sarah responded. finding a strength she didn't know she had. Leave. As he walked towards the exit, he could feel Jack's furious gaze boring into his back. He knew there would be consequences, but at that moment, the only thing that mattered was Lily. In the taxi on the way to the hospital, Sarah felt a mixture of fear and relief. He had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. What would happen now? How would he face Jack? And most importantly, how would he protect Lily from this world he had walked into? As the city lights blurred past the taxi window, Sarah realized she was at a crossroads. The decision he made now would determine not only his future, but also that of his daughter. And for the first time in months, he felt like he was taking control of his life again. Sarah stood in Jack's luxurious office, her heart pounding as she looked through the documents she had accidentally found. His hands shook as he turned the pages, each revelation more shocking than the last. "It can't be," she whispered to herself, voice cracking with disbelief and horror. At this moment, the door burst open. Jack walked in, his face transforming from surprise to fury as he saw Sarah with the documents. "What the hell are you doing?" he roared, advancing towards her. Sarah stepped back, clutching the papers to her chest. "Jack, what is this all about? Money laundering? Human trafficking? What have you gotten me into?" Jack paused, his expression changing into a mask of forced calm. "Sarah, honey, it's not what it seems. Let me explain." "Explain to me what?" Sarah shouted, tears beginning to fall. "That you've been using me? That all those parties, those clients, were part of something much darker." Jack tried to get closer, but Sarah dodged him, moving towards the door. "Stay away. All this time, were you planning to involve me in this? Me and my daughter." "Sarah, listen to me," Jack said, his voice mixing pleading and threat. "You can't leave. You know too much now. Think about Lily, the life I've given her. Do you really want to go back to the streets?" Her daughter's name was like a punch in the gut for Sarah. Lily, their little girl, who was sleeping peacefully in the apartment Jack had provided for them. Guilt and fear mixed inside him. "You're a monster," Sarah whispered, the realization of her situation hitting her with full force. Jack smiled, a cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe, but I'm the monster that put you out of your misery. Do you really think you can survive without me?" Sarah felt like the world was closing in around her. Every luxury, every comfort she had enjoyed over the past few months now felt like a chain tying her to this man, to this dark world she had discovered. "You can't keep me here against my will," Sarah said, trying to sound braver than she felt. Jack approached, his voice low and threatening. "No? Think about it, Sarah. Who would believe you? A single, formerly homeless mother against a respected businessman. Besides, do you really want Lily to grow up without her mother?" Fear gripped Sarah. The veiled threat was clear. If she tried to escape, if she tried to report him, she could lose Lily forever. "What do you want from me?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack smiled, knowing he was in control. "I want you to continue being the lovely hostess you've been. Keep being part of our little family business. In return, you and Lily will have everything you need. It's a good deal, don't you think?" Sarah closed her eyes, feeling like every dream, every hope she had ever had was crumbling. She was trapped, bound to a man and a world she now feared and hated. Sarah began, but the words caught in her throat. At that moment, Jack's phone rang. He looked at the screen and frowned. "I have to take care of this. Don't do anything stupid, Sarah. Remember, you're a part of this now, whether you like it or not." As Jack left the office to take the call, Sarah stood there, shaking, the incriminating documents still in her hands. Her mind worked frantically, searching for a way out, a way to protect herself and Lily. How had it come to this? How could she escape without endangering her daughter? And most importantly, who could she turn to now that she knew that the man who had saved her was actually her biggest threat? The tick-tock of the clock on the wall seemed to mock her, reminding her that time was running out. I had to make a decision, and quickly, but each option seemed to lead to a dead end darker than the last. Sarah ran through the dark streets of Chicago, her heart pounding in her chest. Lily slept in his arms, oblivious to the danger that threatened them. The sound of footsteps behind her made her speed up even more. "Come on, Lily, we have to be strong," Sarah whispered between gasps, her eyes desperately scanning the streets for shelter. Suddenly, a hand grabbed her arm, pulling her into a dark alley. Sarah gasped, preparing for the worst. "Shoo, it's me, Marisol," a familiar voice whispered. Sarah felt her legs go limp with relief. "Marisol, what are you doing here?" "I came to help you," Marisol responded, her eyes shining with determination. "I couldn't leave you alone in this." The sound of approaching male voices made them tense again. "This way," Marisol indicated, leading Sarah deeper into the maze of alleys. As they ran, Sarah couldn't help but think about how she had gotten to this point. Jack's promises, temporary luxury, and then the horrifying discovery of the truth behind his empire. Now, he was on the run not only for his life, but for Lily's future. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. "I know someone who can help us," Marisol responded. "But we have to be careful. Jack's men have eyes everywhere." They arrived at a back door of an abandoned building. Marisol struck 3 times, then 2 more times. The door opened, revealing an older man with tired but kind eyes. "Come in quickly," the man said, closing the door behind them. Once inside, Sarah allowed herself to breathe. Lily shifted in his arms, opening her sleepy eyes. "Mommy?" the little girl murmured. "Show my love. We're safe," Sarah whispered, kissing her daughter's forehead. The man, who introduced himself as Carlos, took them to a hidden room in the basement. "You can stay here for now," he said, "but not for long. Jack has connections everywhere." Sarah nodded, the reality of her situation hitting her again. "What are we going to do, Marisol?" he asked, fear evident in his voice. Marisol took Sarah's hands in hers. "We're going to fight, friend. Not just for us, but for all the women Jack has hurt." "But how?" Sarah asked, desperation threatening to drown her. "He is too powerful," Carlos intervened, his voice deep but full of hope. "I have contacts in the police, honest people who have been trying to take Jack down for years. With your testimony, we might have a chance." Sarah looked at Lily, who was now playing calmly with a makeshift toy. Fear fought against determination in his heart. "If I do this," Sarah said, her voice finding a strength she didn't know she had, "I'll be putting Lily in danger." Marisol squeezed his hand. "And if you don't, Lily will grow up in a world where men like Jack can get away with anything. Is that what you want for her?" Marisol's words resonated with Sarah. He closed his eyes, remembering everything that had happened, everything he had sacrificed. "Okay," he said finally, opening his eyes with new determination. "I will, but I need assurances that Lily will be safe." Carlos nodded solemnly. "We will do everything we can to protect them both." As she sat down to tell her story to Carlos, who would record her testimony, Sarah felt a mix of fear and bravery she had never experienced before. He knew that what he was about to do would change his life forever, but he also knew it was the right thing to do. "I started working for Jack 6 months ago," Sarah began, her voice shaking slightly. At first, it seemed like a dream come true. As the words flowed, Sarah realized that this was just the beginning of an even bigger battle. Would I have the strength to see this through to the end? And what price would he have to pay for his bravery? Only time would tell, but for now, Sarah knew there was no turning back. Sarah found herself in a cheap hotel room, her heart pounding as she looked at her unexpected ally. Marisol, the woman she had met at the shelter what seemed like a lifetime ago. "I can't believe you're here," Sarah whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. "How did you find me?" Marisol smiled weakly, her eyes reflecting a mix of determination and fear. "I never stopped looking for you, friend. When I saw the news about Jack's scandal, I knew you would be in danger." Sarah collapsed onto the bed, the weight of the past few days falling on her like an avalanche. "Everything has fallen apart, Marisol. Jack, he wasn't who I thought he was. And now, his people are looking for me. I fear for Lily's life." Marisol sat next to her, holding her hands, Listen to me carefully, Sarah. You are not alone in this. I have contacts, people who can help us expose Jack and his organization. Sarah looked at her, a spark of hope lighting up in her eyes. Really? But why would you risk everything for us? Marisol sighed deeply. Because I know what it's like to be trapped in a desperate situation. And because, well, let's just say I have my own issues with people like Jack. At that moment, Lily began to cry from the makeshift crib in the corner. Sarah rose to comfort her, her movements automatic but filled with love. What's the plan? Sarah asked, rocking Lily in her arms. Marisol took out a burner phone from her bag. I have a friend in the prosecution. With the information you have on Jack's operations, we could take down his entire empire. But it will be dangerous, Sarah. Very dangerous. Sarah looked at her daughter, then at Marisol. Fear and determination fought within him. I don't have a choice, do I? If I don't do this, we'll never be safe. Marisol nodded solemnly. That's right. But this time you are not alone. We will fight together. As Marisol made the call, Sarah felt a mix of overwhelming emotions. Fear for what was to come, gratitude for Marisol's loyalty, and a fierce determination he didn't know he possessed. Suddenly, a knock on the door startled them. Sarah hugged Lily tightly, panic taking over her. Who is it? Marisol called, her voice strained. Room service. A male voice responded. Marisol and Sarah exchanged alarmed glances. They hadn't asked for anything. We have to go now, Marisol whispered, quickly grabbing her things. Sarah nodded, her heart beating so hard she feared it might wake Lily. As they prepared to escape through the bathroom window, Sarah couldn't help but think about how her life had gotten to this point. No matter what happens, Sarah said, looking at Marisol determinedly, we're going to end this. For Lily, for us, and for all the women Jack has hurt. Marisol nodded, a fierce smile on her face. Together until the end, friend. As they slid down the fire escape, with the sound of the door being forced open behind them, Sarah knew they were about to embark on the most dangerous battle of their lives. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't alone. With Marisol by her side and Lily in her arms, Sarah was ready to face whatever came. The future was uncertain and terrifying, but Sarah felt an inner strength she had never experienced before. Would they be able to defeat Jack and his organization? Or were they running towards even greater danger? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain. Sarah would fight with everything she had for a better future for her daughter. Sarah's heart was pounding as she approached the office building where Jack maintained his criminal empire. Lily was safe with Marisol, but Sarah felt the weight of her absence like a physical pain. Every step she took brought her closer to danger, but also to the possibility of freedom. Come on, Sarah, she whispered to herself. It's now or never. With trembling hands, he inserted the key card Elena had gotten him. The door opened with a soft click, and Sarah entered the deserted hall. The elevator took her to the top floor, where she knew she would find Jack's office. Every second that passed was torture, fear threatening to paralyze her. As he exited the elevator, he came face to face with Ramon, Jack's bodyguard. What are you doing here, Sarah? Ramon asked, his hand instinctively moving toward his gun. Sarah swallowed, forcing a smile. Jack asked me to come. He said he had something important to discuss. Ramon looked at her suspiciously, but finally nodded. Okay, come in. But I'll be watching you. Sarah walked into Jack's office, her heart hammering in her chest. Jack had his back turned, looking out the window. Sarah, what a surprise, Jack said, turning slowly. To what do I owe the pleasure? Sarah took a deep breath, mustering all her courage. It's over, Jack. I have proof of everything. Your dirty dealings, human trafficking, everything. If you don't let me go with my daughter, all of this will reach the police. Jack stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, to Sarah's surprise, he started laughing. Oh, Sarah, he said, approaching her. I always knew you were special. But do you really think you can threaten me? In one swift movement, Jack pulled a gun from his desk, pointing it directly at Sarah. Do you think I haven't faced threats before? Jack growled. Do you think I don't know how to handle people like you? Fear paralyzed Sarah for a moment, but then she thought about Lily, about everything she had gone through to get to this point. He couldn't give up now. Go ahead and shoot, Sarah challenged, her voice shaking but firm. But if you do, everything will come to light. I already took care of that. Jack hesitated, doubt crossing his face. You're lying. Do you want to take a chance? Sarah asked. Everything I've been through, everything I've suffered. Do you think I wouldn't take precautions? The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah could hear her own heart beating, every second an eternity. Suddenly, the door burst open. It was Elena, followed by several police officers. Police! Everyone on the ground! One of the officers shouted. Jack, surprised, dropped the gun. Sarah took advantage of the moment to get away from him, running towards Elena. Are you okay? Elena asked, hugging Sarah. Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. Yes, I'm fine. Lily? He's safe, Elena assured. It's all over, Sarah. You did it. As the officers handcuffed Jack, Sarah watched the scene with a mixture of relief and disbelief. He had risked everything, and against all odds, he had won. It's over, Sarah whispered, more to herself than anyone else. It's really over. But as she walked out of the office, leaning on Elena, Sarah knew that this was not the end, but the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter full of challenges, without a doubt, but also of hope. For the first time in a long time, Sarah allowed herself to smile, thinking about the future she could now build for herself and Lily. Dawn peeked through the building's windows, bathing the city in golden light. For Sarah, it was more than a new day. It was the beginning of a new life. Sarah stood in front of the mirror in her new apartment, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. 2 years had passed since that fateful night in the park, and his life had taken a 180-degree turn. Mommy, Mommy! The voice of Lily, her 2-year-old daughter, brought her out of her thoughts. Sarah turned to see the little girl running towards her, her brown curls bouncing with each step. What's wrong, my love? Sarah asked, bending down to receive her daughter in her arms. Are we going to the park today? Lily asked, her eyes shining with excitement. Sarah smiled, feeling a surge of love and gratitude. Of course, honey. But first, Mommy has to finish getting ready for her big day. As she put on the suit she had bought for the occasion, Sarah couldn't help but think about everything she had gone through to get to this moment. The nights in the shelter, the exhausting work, the moments of desperation, and then the meeting with Jack, which had changed everything. The doorbell rang, bringing her out of her memories. It was Elena, who had become a second mother to her and a loving grandmother to Lily. Oh, little girl, just look at you, Elena exclaimed when she saw Sarah. You look beautiful. Sarah felt tears threatening to ruin her makeup. Thank you, Elena, for everything. I don't know what I would have done without you. Elena hugged her tightly. You did all the hard work, Mija. I was just there to support you. As they walked to the car, Sarah couldn't help but feel a mix of nerves and excitement. Today was the day she would finally open her own foundation, dedicated to helping single mothers in desperate situations. Upon arriving at the event venue, Sarah saw Jack waiting for her at the entrance. Their relationship had evolved in a way neither of them had expected, becoming a partnership based on mutual respect and the desire to do good. Ready to change the world? Jack asked with a smile. Sarah took a deep breath. Ready to try, at least. As she walked to the podium, with Lily holding her hand and Elena and Jack at her sides, Sarah felt a surge of emotions. She looked at the audience, full of expectant faces, many of them women who had been through situations similar to hers. 2 years ago, Sarah began, her voice shaking slightly, I was alone, pregnant and homeless on the streets of Chicago. Today, I am here to tell you that there is hope. As she shared her story, Sarah saw tears in the eyes of many people in the audience. But he also saw something else. Determination, strength, the desire to fight for a better future. This foundation is not mine alone, Sarah continued. It belongs to all of us. It is a beacon of hope for those who feel lost in the darkness. Together, we can build a better future, not only for ourselves, but for our children. If you like stories like this, subscribe to the channel. There will always be new videos, and you won't want to miss any of these. Thrills.